Day 27. First of all, I just have to say, so proud of you for making it to day 27. That's an accomplishment in itself. Today is all about afraid of the talk. And I'm going to start actually with the real story because I feel like it's a perfect example of what so many of you that are watching and so many of us have experienced in the whole idea of what is the talk. Mandy shares and says, growing up, sex was never talked about, which created a stigma in my mind that sex was dirty and bad, and that to be curious about it was sinful. I grouped the things that I didn't understand, boys, relationships, intimacy, and sex into one category and put a giant red X over it and never asked questions out of fear of asking something wrong. That is a perfect depiction of a stigma that so many of us have a similar story about when it comes to what is sex. Man, we have these stigmas and assumptions just because of the silence around it or because of the perversion we experience of it in the world. And I love how the author, Chris, writes, his answer to perversion is to teach us the real version, not no version. But so often, historically, we've seen that while we know the world has perverted sex, in our homes and in our safe environments, it's often silenced or shame because it's this curiosity you don't know what to do with. But we do believe the kingdom of God would celebrate sex. And so what does that mean? What does that look like? How do we overcome this fear around the talk, around the word sex? And so really it breaks down to, let's go back, no matter how old you are watching this, whether you're young teenager, 20s, 30s, and you're thinking, oh man, how did my first mention about sex? What did that feel like? What did that look like? What was that? Was that healthy? Do I want to reciprocate that one day in my home? And so when we look back, we look at there's three different environments. The first one would be the silent environment. And this is where, in essence, nobody is talking about it. It is completely silent on the matter, and we're kind of left feeling like, well, the most important people in my life aren't talking to me about this, so it must not be that important. And we're left to figure it out on our own and really be trained by probably just media, peers, culture, and society. The second environment would be the saturated environment, where maybe it's not silent, it's actually kind of just like crude and rude, or just kind of like, oh, sex is natural, everybody's doing it. This could span from anywhere where you're watching television or commercials or movies with your family and a really, crude sex scene comes on and nobody flinches and you're like, okay, this is normal. We just watch this. It could even be something like, for me, my high school boyfriend, his parents gave him a box of condoms on his 16th birthday and just told us to have fun. Very much like, it's natural, here's sex, it's whatever it is, go have fun with it. Or even we've heard stories where some parents are like, oh, we need to give our children pornography and teaching them to masturbate, to take care of things. So it's this very questionable, wow, this is all sex is. It's just natural. Everybody's doing it in a very saturated home where jokes might be made about it too. The third environment is the conflicted environment. And this is what we often see in churches or maybe religious homes would be, okay, well, sex is good. It belongs to God. But really all we hear about it is it's bad. Like all we hear is no, 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 no. It's dirty. It's gross. But then all of a sudden we're expected to not ask any questions, not to think anything of it until your wedding day. And then you're supposed to be this like godly and sensuous woman. And you're like, what? All I knew was like the big red X, like Mandy talked about in the story where she's like, I don't know. I just put an X over that and kind of pushed that away in like that, closet that's messy that I don't want anybody to see. We just think I'm not dealing with that. I'm not touching that. But then we get into marriage and we have so many questions and so much shame and pain around the topic of sex. So at Moral Revolution, we are fighting for a healthy and intentional home environment instead of that silent, saturated, and conflicted. So we want to make sure that silence and shame do not win the game, and that we realize that sex isn't a bad word. That's what we fought for in our home, where I'm a mom of 4, and so we've told our kids sex is not a bad word. Funny story, my sons even one time caught them at ages 5 and 7 having a conversation where the 5-year-old's trying to pester the other one, and he's like, sex, sex, sex. And the older boy's like, it's not a bad word. And I'm like, yes, we're winning. He knows it's not a bad word. He's like, actually, it's a good God thing, but some people in the world just took it and messed it up. And then, his brother's just annoyed that he's not irritating him. But then my older one returns with, but in high school, you're going to have some girls that want to do it to you. And he's like, what? Why? He's like, because you're so handsome. So clearly they didn't have a full understanding of sex, but they knew it's a word that we can talk about in our home. It is not a bad word. It's something that as parents, we want our kids to know that we have the privilege, we have the power of first mention. So we want to be able to talk to our kids about it. We want to establish and create a safe and healthy space where they can know we're going to tell them the whole truth and nothing but the truth when it comes to sex. We're not going to say, oh, you wouldn't understand. We actually normally say, you would understand, but we're asking, do you want to know all of these things yet? And really just create a conversation. So actually, instead of being afraid of the talk, I think we could kind of get rid of the idea of it being one talk and create a culture of constant conversations. And so whether or not you had that and you've looked back and you're like, oh, wow, I was definitely the saturated environment, or I was definitely the silent environment, you get to move forward and know what you want to create in the future of your home. You can even, depending on where you're at, you might still be living at home with your parents. Be brave. Start the conversation. Say, hey, I'd actually love to hear your input on this, because I have learned a lot from peers or from what I've seen on TV or from the song lyrics I'm listening to. But like parents, I want to know what are your thoughts on this, and can we have some healthy conversations about it? So really, really, no, I want to invest in saying, I don't want to be afraid of the talk. I want to move forward and live a life, which the last part of day 27 says, ask God to teach you how to talk about your desire for sex and marriage with freedom and without shame. And so you might be the pioneer of that, the first one in your family, the first one in your home, but you can do it. So let's not be afraid of the talk.